This is Suddenly Family. I'm Samuel Burke, and these are the true stories of people's lives forever changed by at-home DNA tests. The DNA world is full of people looking for people. Each DNA company has its own database, so some users take every DNA test out there in hopes of finding their relatives. But most people aren't looking for anyone in particular. They're just curious. It may be a Black Friday sale that prompts them to buy the test. When 28-year-old Cameron Nevada receives a DNA kit as a birthday present, he swabs his cheek and has no idea he's about to become the key to unlocking a 75-year-old mystery.
She went out Christmas caroling with a youth group, and she didn't return.
They felt that she passed away, that she was killed, murdered.
Christmas Day, I'm looking at my 23andMe DNA matches. See this new one. It had this really unusual profile that caught my attention.
Then, my golly, the emotions and the tears.
A missing person who doesn't even realize she's missing. That's coming up on Suddenly Family. If you're listening to this podcast, that means you appreciate investigative storytelling. What if you had the chance to investigate and share important stories? Whether you want to dive into a new career in journalism or start your own investigative podcast, the Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State University offers a variety of graduate programs just for you. My first step was visiting cronkite.asu.edu, where you can explore the master's degrees in investigative journalism, mass communication, and sports journalism. Now, back to Suddenly Family. It's December of 1943, and 16-year-old Caroline Yerke stays out late Christmas caroling with her friends. The next morning, her little brother, Arthur, wakes up and doesn't see his beloved sister in her bed. He's distressed, but Caroline's been having issues with their stepmother. So Arthur and their other sister think maybe Caroline is staying somewhere else and just needs space. But when Caroline doesn't show up at work, her boss calls the Detroit authorities. The story makes it into the newspapers, but investigators are never able to locate Caroline or her remains. Her younger brother Arthur spends the rest of his life searching for his big sister and telling stories about her to his daughter, Adrienne Nevada.
She was a thread in our family, always. She was part of my dad's history when he talked about his childhood and growing up, especially around Christmas. My older sister, Diane, her middle name is Carol, after her. Around Christmas time, he would talk about her, just kind of get all choked up, like he couldn't even imagine what had happened to her.
And did he recall them being close brother and sister?
They were very close, and it sounded like maybe they didn't have the best childhood growing up, and it's kind of sounded like she was protective over him.
What did your dad think had happened to his sister?
He just felt that he never really said it in words, but I know one time I was with one of my uncles, my Uncle Dan, and my Uncle Dan said at the time that it was investigated and maybe something, the sheriff was involved, and he felt like there was something wrong at that time.
Something wrong meaning foul play or murder?
Exactly. Funny you say foul play because those are the exact words that he had said. There was foul play involved.
So this was, for all intents and purposes, a cold case?
Correct, exactly. It was upsetting because my dad didn't have a very good childhood, and it was upsetting to me knowing that he never knew.
Adrienne's dad, Arthur, dies in 2006 with no answers about his sister's disappearance. So a school picture of her is the only connection Adrienne has to her missing aunt. Until Adrienne's son, Cameron, takes a DNA test.
My son received 23andMe as a birthday present. I get a phone call from him at 5:30 in the morning. I'm like, uh-oh, this is weird.
You must panic. Any mom getting that type of call must be nervous.
Right. And I picked up the phone and he's like, Mom, you are not going to believe this. What was Dad's sister's name that disappeared in December? And I said, Caroline. And he said, Mom, I'm in correspondence with her son. And I'm like, no, Cameron, be careful. It could be, somebody got your information, knows this. It could be fraud. Be careful. This is, for sure, this is really who you're talking to. He goes, Mom, I am talking to her son, Jerry. And guess what? Aunt Caroline is alive.
We'll be right back. Podcasts shed light on stories that otherwise may not be told. What if you could be that voice for someone? Well, you can. The Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State University allows you to do just that. Become an investigative journalist, a strategic communicator in the media field, or a thought leader in the world of sports. Do what I did. Visit cronkite.asu.edu to learn more about their graduate degrees. Who will you become at the Cronkite School? Now, back to Suddenly Family.
And I picked up the phone and he's like, Mom, you are not going to believe this. What was Dad's sister's name that disappeared in December? And I said, Caroline. And he said, Mom, I'm in correspondence with her son. And I'm like, no. He goes, Mom, I am talking to her son, Jerry. And guess what? Aunt Caroline is alive. And I'm like, it started crying. I'm like, you're kidding. So I got my siblings on the phone. I got my brother and my sister and my two sisters all early in the morning. And we all got on the phone and heard the conversation with my son, Cameron. And when I saw a picture of my cousin, unbelievable, looks like my dad, has my dad's eyes. I mean, was 100% Yerke through and through.
The Yerke family had decades ago given up hope this day would ever come. They're positive this is their missing Aunt Caroline, and now they're speaking with Caroline's son, Jerry Vincent. But he has always known his mother as Catherine, not Caroline. His mom has a different birth date than the one they're giving, and he has no idea she's a missing person. Jerry is in California, receiving calls from new relatives who seem to know more about his mom than even he does.
Growing up, my parents were always going to my father's brothers and sisters' houses or my aunt and uncle's houses. And we were always getting together for family reunions, which was always fun. And anytime I brought up anything with my mom's end of the connection, we were immediately cut off and told us not to ask. Just basically, it's not important. I don't want to talk about it. Finally, in the 70s, it was just a moot point, and we just accepted the fact that she didn't want to talk or discuss her family, which we could never understand why.
What did you make of all that, being a kid and having a mom who had no family and very little background?
Well, at one time, my mom said her parents came from Germany and that she was ashamed of being a German, especially since she was here in the 20s and 30s. And Germany was by the time the war started, Germany was a bad name. And she wanted no association with it. So that I sort of said, okay, I understand. But it always troubled me that I was missing half of a family. I always went and saw my uncles, but I never met or heard or saw photos or anything of my mom's side of the family. So I felt a vacuum there that was always nagging at me through the years.
Jerry's very close to his mom, so this is much more than just a missing puzzle piece for him. Knowing that an entire part of his mom's existence is blank doesn't just eat away at Jerry. It troubles his wife, Regina, who's also very close to her mother-in-law.
I asked about it as we were in the kitchen cooking while the guys are outside. I asked her about her family, and she said, that's long gone. I don't want to talk about it. Every couple years or so, we would try to touch bases with her on her side of the family, and there was no indications.
Occasionally, my wife and I would talk about it, and I'd share the facts that I knew, and we just let it be. But then we saw a story about somebody 40 years after leaving each other, they reconnected through DNA. And my wife said, well, why don't we run a DNA test on her?
I said, Jerry, instead of you doing it, you are a mixture of your mom and your dad. So who knows what we may find from you. But your mom is so alive. You need to get this DNA and get her DNA done to see where in the hell is she from.
That was an excellent idea. And over Thanksgiving holiday weekend, I asked her to please submit the DNA to me. So she did the DNA test. I submitted it. And the day before Christmas, we open it up and there's her results. And bingo, all of a sudden I start getting hit. And my wife and I were just thrown back. This woman's history starts coming to light. We're getting phone calls from people from all around the United States.
One of the family members who comes up as a DNA match is Janine Kate. She happens to be a genealogy aficionado, and Janine's captivated by the message Jerry's written on his mom's 23andMe DNA profile.
I'm looking at my 23andMe DNA matches, see this new one. It had this really unusual profile that caught my attention, saying that she hadn't had contact with her family since the 1940s. So her name on the profile wasn't Caroline, it was Catherine. It was close. And so I immediately sent an excited message on 23andMe saying, I think you're Caroline Yerke, who disappeared in 1943, and it's time to come home. And I mean, literally, I was crying when I realized who she was.
And that message Janine writes through 23andMe goes straight to Jerry Vinson. The emails and phone calls pouring in start to fill in the blanks of Jerry's mom's past and who she probably is. But Jerry has always known his mom as Catherine Davis, even though everyone calling is saying she has to be the missing Caroline Lydia Yerke. And Jerry's wife, Regina, gets right to the bottom of who her mother-in-law really is.
Jerry went to pick her up. He had gotten some information about this Caroline Lydia Yerke, and he didn't know if this was her or not. So when he arrived with her to have dinner with us that Christmas afternoon, I looked at her and I said, Mom, what was your birth given name? Because nobody ever asked her. We always ask her, what's your name, your maiden name? And she would say, Catherine Davis. So this time I said, what is your birth name? She said, Caroline Yerke. Caroline Lydia Yerke. So our jaws dropped and the emotions started rolling through us. And Jerry's sitting at a table with his computer open. And then he says, Mom, did you have a sister named Hannah? And she replied, yes. Then, my golly, the emotions and the tears and everything started to really take place because we found the match. Jumping joy of happiness that we found her family.
All his life, Jerry has wondered why his mom has been so mysterious about her past. In spite of his close bond with his mom, Jerry knows almost nothing about her childhood and what her family was like. And he feels a gap in his own life, having no connection to his maternal family. Now he's suddenly inundated with calls from newly discovered cousins from the DNA test who are telling him his mother has been a missing person, presumed dead since 1943. They're calling and telling Jerry how their parents, his mom's siblings, had asked them to continue their search for answers.
Well, at first they didn't believe it, but it was heart-wrenching that one of my new cousins, his father was Archie, and his father passed away, Uncle Archie passed away, and his son Alan promised to keep looking for her. He was playing golf and he got a phone call. They said they found my mom, and he just fell to his knees crying. Man, this is really emotional, but he fell to his knees crying. And then of all things, I learned that I had a cousin that lived less than 3 miles away from my house, and he could see my house from his ridgetop. My gosh, this is just incredible. And then slowly, each of my new cousins, my other half of the family that I'd been missing for all this lifetime, came out and they filled me in on what the story was.
Jerry's mom is in her 90s and showing the usual physical and mental signs of aging. Her memory has faded somewhat, but with the details coming in, Jerry and his wife start to get new information from her about her disappearance.
Jerry was pushing her a little harder. She said there was some abuse. She got very angry. On the first time that Janine came over,
Janine Kate, the new cousin you discovered on the DNA test.
Janine was starting to talk to her about things. And Janine asked about how was it like at home with the stepmom. Mom's reaction, she changed her attitude immediately, her facial expression. She tensened up her body and straightened her body up. And she said that woman was evil and horrible. You could see the anger after all those years. My God, she's 90-something, so she was in her teens. So we're talking 70-some years later. She was still tensioning up over it. And the part that we didn't know was that this woman, the stepmom, that she would be renting their beds to strangers. Also, Arthur's children, they said that Arthur also didn't want to talk about much of his younger years.
Arthur, her brother.
Arthur, her brother, 2 years younger than her. He did not want to talk about it. But at the end of his life, he talked some, and he said it was not an easy life, and also that to earn money, the stepmother would rent beds for travelers. And he mentioned to his children that these people would sleep in their bed, in his bed. So the abuse part that Caroline has mentioned, so something definitely happened and must have been really not good for her at age 17 to walk away from home and never, ever go back. Never, ever she went back, or never, ever she contacted any of them. She disappeared totally.
It was quite a shock when she said that. Nobody was prepared for that. Turned out my mom had changed her name when she ran away from home. She met my father. She was of age. She got married, and they moved to California.
Jerry never imagined his mom fled her home as a teenage girl. The situation with her stepmother and the abuse so dire, his mom had taken the drastic measure of changing her name and even her birth date so no one would ever find her. What Caroline Yerke didn't know is after she ran away, her father searched desperately for her and divorced the stepmother just months later. When Jerry asks his mom why she never, at the very least, contacted her siblings again, She says she didn't think they cared after she'd been gone for so long. In the months after the discovery, Caroline Yerke's 90th birthday becomes a family reunion where her nieces and nephews who've heard the story of their missing aunt their entire lives meet her for the very first time.
There was just nothing but warmth and love. And they all came in and they introduced themselves to my mom and sat down privately to discuss family things. And it's hard to put in words and not get emotional a lot of times. But the vacuum was filled, and it was like all of a sudden they're all there.
All of Jerry's cousins make the trip, some of them from across the country, to take part in this once-in-a-lifetime occasion, including Adrian Nevada, whose dad, Arthur, had woken up to find his sister missing that Christmas in 1943.
I did bring a bunch of pictures out, and I said, I believe this is you. And I purposely didn't say my dad's name because I kind of wanted to hear her say it. And she said, well, that was my baby brother, Arthur. And she mentioned something about they used to get in a lot of mischief together. Some days I wake up and I still can't believe that my aunt is alive.
For Janine Kate, who's quickly developed a close relationship with her cousin Jerry and his wife Regina, the reunion was bittersweet.
There's a lot of tragedy to this. For this happy ending, there's a lot of missed opportunities. I think about how overjoyed they would have been if she had found them sooner. And I do know that Arthur, her younger brother, always searched for her. He never stopped.
Given Caroline's age, I'm curious to know if she was able to make sense of everything happening at her birthday celebration and family reunion. I asked Regina if she felt her mother-in-law really understood these were the children of her siblings, her nieces and nephews, who she was only just meeting for the first time at 90 years old.
I think so. I think she had the closure with this reunion when she met all of them. I told Jerry, I said, when she passes away, she'll pass away with peace because she has reconnected with her past in a positive note, which was good for her. Yes, overwhelming, but I think she has been very glad because I feel she had a good connection with her brother, Arthur, and seeing his children and then knowing that they were there visiting her, I think it was really a good closure for her to see that he did well, see the photos. She saw a photo of her siblings grown up. I think she will die in peace. I really do. She has found peace in her heart. I think that has changed her inside for the better.
On the next episode, the DNA story of a woman with 6 different parents.
I logged in to look at the report and I was like, whoa!
How did this happen?
This puzzle piece that I didn't know was missing, but kind of knew was missing, was falling into place. It felt amazing.
One of the greatest moments of my life.
That's on the following edition of Suddenly Family, a production of CNN Philippines and Loomis Productions. Our editors are Lori Burke, Elizabeth Joseph, and Elaine Lee. Sound engineer, Levi Mercurio. Executive producer, Michelle Ancheta. Executive consultant, Army Harin Bennett. This show is created, written, and hosted by me. I'm Samuel Burke.
have a responsibility as a journalist to tell the public what's going on.
Now more than ever, the role of the media and journalists is extremely important.
To make that first rough draft of history kung tawagin.
As journalists, we deliver the news, we give the right kind of information.
News really has the power to shape and influence a person's perspective of the world.
It's about the people, it's about the stories. We verify, we confirm, we double check, we triple check from different sources.
To give them the truth. Trust in one word, I would believe, is integrity.
You can't force trust, you have to earn it.
People can't trust me if they know that I don't know what I'm talking about. It can be very challenging, but it's very, very fulfilling.
News you can trust.
News you can trust.
This is CNN Philippines. News you can trust.